Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to talk about Genesis 3, verse 2. And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden." At first glance, Eve's response seems simple, but according to the Zohar, this verse initiates the first human theological dialogue, reflecting how desire, reason, and divine command begin to be dissected by the mind. The woman, who represents Malkuth, the feminine vessel, is now engaging not only with the serpent, but with the concept of restriction, setting the stage for the fall from higher Edenic consciousness into fragmented perception. The first phrase we have, "and the woman said," the feminine voice in dialogue with the other side. The Zohar emphasizes that Eve speaks first, not out of weakness, but because she embodies receptivity and the interface between above and below. She is Malkuth, the receiver of divine flow, and therefore the most directly influenced by external forces. Her speaking indicates that she is not passive, but actively participating in discernment. However, by entering dialogue with the serpent, she shifts from intuitive knowing to rational evaluation. This marks a turning point in the soul, the move from pure purity and pure unity to self-reflective separation. In speaking to the serpent, she descended from silence into discourse. Thus, the concealment began. The next verse we have, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden." Partial truth, the beginning of rationalization. Eve begins her reply with a statement of truth. God did indeed permit them to eat of the trees of the garden. But the Zohar notes that something is already off. Eve focuses only on permission, not on purpose. The divine command was not just a prohibition, but a covenant of alignment, a sacred structure of boundaries within abundance. Her emphasis on "we may eat" already reflects a shift in consciousness from divine relationship to human entitlement. This reflects the soul's early steps into spiritual ego. What is mine? What am I allowed? Instead of what am I called to steward? Dialogue versus devekut, the descent into duality. The Zohar often contrasts speech with cleaving. Before the serpent's temptation, Adam and Eve live in the devekut, which is cleaving, silent union with the divine. Now Eve begins dialogue with a separate voice, and in doing so, externalizes the divine command. This is the first step toward objectifying God, and thus losing the immediate presence of the divine. The Kabbalistic symbolism behind the verse is Malkuth engaging with the Klippah. In the Tree of Life, Eve represents Malkuth the bottom Sephirah, vessel, earth, receiving. Serpent represent Sitra Akhra, which is the other side, opposite of holiness. The Zohar teaches that the encounter between Malkuth and the Klipah is inevitable. This is where free will is born. In this verse, Malkuth enters dialogue with the Klipah rather than remaining aligned through silence and obedience to higher order. Speech is the clothing of consciousness. She clothed the divine will in words, and in doing so, opened the door for distortion. The mystical implication behind the verse is the first echo of selfhood. This verse represents the first self-aware statement from a human soul in Torah. Eve refers to we, a collective human identity, separate from God. The Zohar sees this as the emergence of ego, a necessary stage in the soul's evolution, but also the first veil between the individual and the divine whole. To summarize, Genesis 3 verse 2, in the light of the Zohar, is not merely a line of conversation. It is the threshold moment where human consciousness begins to move from intimate unity with the divine into dialogue with separation. Eve, representing Malkuth, enters into conversation with the serpent. Her reply is accurate, but subtly shifts focus from divine purpose to human permission. The soul begins to focus on what is allowed instead of why it exists. Her use of the phrase "we may eat" signals the rise of a separate will, a me or we, distinct from divine flow. This is the beginning of ego, rationalization, and spiritual selfhood. In the Zohar's view, this descent is necessary but perilous. By engaging the serpent through speech rather than silence and alignment, the soul steps into the realm of illusion. This verse teaches the first fall is not disobedience, but it is separation. The moment the soul speaks with the serpent, it already no longer speaks from within God. The voice of the divine becomes a concept, not a communion. And from that moment, the path back home begins. That's it for today. Thank you very much for your donation. Be blessed, everyone, and I will see you on the next episode.